This poem was more dangerous than a weapon. What if I told you that in an age of fire hoses, firearms, that one of the most feared weapons was not a gun, but a poem? At a time when anger was boiling over and cities were on fire, the biggest force for change wasn't always a politician or a protest group. Sometimes it was just a rhythm, a voice, a verse. This is the story of how poets wielded words as weapons and how one poem in particular became an anthem for a generation that refused to be silent. A world on fire. So, how can a simple poem be dangerous? Well, first you'd have to understand the world that it was born into. America in the 1960s was a pressure cooker and it was about to explode. The civil rights movement, after years of nonviolent protest, was met with incredibly brutal resistance. And at the same time, my childhood memories recall the Black Power movement was roaring to life. Its momentum was fueled by words like from Malcolm X and groups like the Black Panther Party. I even remember doing research at about age 8 on the White Panther Party, the White Rose Society. Cities were burning, both literally and figuratively, from the Watts riots in '65 to the nationwide protests after Dr. King's assassination in 1968. Growing up those days in Atlanta, a hotbed of civil disturbance, offers a unique perspective in today's times. In my mind, there's the sound of all progress made for humanity during my entire life is being ripped away one piece at a time. The intense backdrop of the times sparked an explosion of creativity known as the Black Arts Movement. The writer and the critic Larry Neal famously called it aesthetic and spiritual sister of the Black Power concept. And for these artists, art wasn't a hobby, it was a tool. It was a way to rally the people, to build a new black consciousness, and to forge a culture completely separate from the white-dominated mainstream. They weren't for writing for fancy critics or big publishing houses. They were writing for the people in the streets. Their work was meant to be shouted at rallies, performed in community theaters, passed around in small independent magazines. Because a poem could be written, memorized, and shared so quickly, it became the movement's most immediate and powerful weapon. These weren't just words on a page, they were declarations of war. The precursors, forging the weapon, but this idea of poetry as a weapon wasn't exactly new. It's been forged in the fires of other American revolutions, the one nearly 2 centuries early, and it was pioneered by a woman named Phyllis Wheatley, kidnapped from West Africa, sold into slavery in Boston, where she was about 7 years of age. She completely shattered the racist ideologies of her time, despite being enslaved. Wheatley's genius was impossible to deny. Her owners taught her to read and write, and she devoured the most complex books that she could find. By her early teens, she was already publishing her own poetry, but the poem that cemented her legacy was one that she wrote to George Washington in 1775. Think about the sheer audacity of that. An enslaved African woman writing a poem of encouragement to the commander-in-chief of an army fighting for freedom. She wrote, "Proceed, great chief, with virtue on thy side. Thy every action like the goddess guide. A crown, a mansion, and a throne that shine with gold unfading. Washington, be thine." Washington, a slave owner himself, was so impressed by her poetical talents that he wrote back to her, expressing his admiration and even inviting her to his headquarters, an almost unheard of gesture. The poem was later published by none other than Thomas Paine in 1776. Wheatley was using her poetry not just to support the revolution, but to subtly point out the hypocrisy of a nation fighting for its own liberty while enslaving others. She proved that a poem could be a petition, a demand for intellectual equality, and a powerful claim to one's own humanity. She was the first to show that a verse could be a weapon, paving the way for generations of revolutionary poets to come. In the rising action, there's the voices of a generation, and as the civil rights movement hit its peak, a new generation of poets grabbed that weapon and they sharpened it, and they made art that was raw, confrontational, and unapologetically black. Poets like Nikki Giovanni, known as the poet of the Black Revolution, captured the militant energy of the era. Her first collections, Black Feeling, Black Talk, and Black Judgment, were massive hits, selling thousands of copies and giving voice to the anger and pride of a generation. Giovanni's work mixed the personal with the political, celebrating black love as a form of black wealth while tearing into a system built on racial justice or racial injustice. And then there's Audre Lorde, a self-described black lesbian mother warrior poet. Lorde's work showed the power of speaking your truth in a world that wants you to stay silent. For Lorde, poetry wasn't some high-minded luxury. In her famous essay, she put it plainly: poetry is not a luxury, it is a vital necessity of our existence. It was a tool for survival. It's how you give a name to the nameless so it can be thought. It's how you take all that confusion, anger, and hope, and you turn it into a language, and then into ideas, and finally into action. Lorde believed that our dreams show us the path to freedom, and poems give us the strength to chase those dreams. Her work tackled racism, sexism, and homophobia all at once, arguing that real revolution required changing not just the world, but ourselves. And then you had groups like the Last Poets, formed in Harlem on Malcolm X's birthday in 1968. They blended politically charged spoken word with raw, percussive beats. Their name came from a poem by South African revolutionary Kgosi, I can't pronounce it, KgoSitSile, who predicted that in an age of open struggle, we would be in the last era of poetry. With tracks like Niggers Are Scared of Revolution, they were in your face, provocative, and incredibly influential. Today, they're widely seen as the godfathers of hip-hop, creating the blueprint for political rap that would follow. Together, these artists were creating the soundtrack to a revolution, proving a poem could be as powerful as any protest march. And then you bring on the climax. The revolution will be live. And that brings us to 1970. The country is a powder keg. The Vietnam War is escalating. Students are protesting on college campuses, and the Black Power movement is under intense government attack. And into this mix walks a 21-year-old poet and musician named Gil Scott-Heron. He was about to light the fuse. The fuse that was his poem, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. It wasn't really a song, it was a prophecy, delivered in spoken word over a hypnotic driving rhythm. The title was already a slogan floating around activist circles, but Scott-Heron turned it into a cultural manifesto. The poem is a takedown of a media-obsessed society that keeps its citizens distracted with commercials and celebrity gossip while the world burns. He lists all the things the revolution will not be. It will not be brought to you by Xerox. It will not star Natalie Wood or Steve McQueen, and it damn sure won't go better with Coke. He paints a picture of a country plugged in, turned on, and copped out, just passively watching a sanitized version of reality from the comfort of the living room couch. But then he flips the script. He tells you what the revolution will be. He says there will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. He says black people will be in the street looking for a brighter day, and then he delivers the most important line. You will not be able to stay home, brother. The revolution will be live. As Scott Heron himself later explained, the first change has to happen in your mind. The revolution he was talking about wasn't just about an armed conflict in the streets. It was about a revolution of consciousness. It was a wake-up call to reject passivity, to stop being a spectator, and to become an active participant in the fight for your own freedom. The real struggle wouldn't be captured on film or sponsored by a corporation. It would be happening live in the streets, in your community, inside your own hearts and minds. The poem's impact was like a shock wave. It became an anthem, a slogan painted on signs at protests from the anti-apartheid movement to Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter. It fused the militant energy of the Black Arts movement with a sharp critique of consumer culture, and in doing so, created one of the founding documents of all political hip-hop. The poets of that era left us with a powerful legacy that art isn't just for museums. It can be a real catalyst for change. Their words still echo today in all of the movements for justice. So what do you think? What poem, what song, what piece of art feels revolutionary to you right now? Drop a line in the comments. And if you believe that words can change the world, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell. From Phyllis Wheatley using a quill to challenge a general, to Audre Lorde turning poetry into a tool for survival, to Gil Scott-Heron declaring the revolution would be live, these artists all proved the same thing. A poem isn't just words on a page. It can be a mirror, forcing a society to see its own ugly truths. It can be a hammer that shatters a deafening silence. And in the right hands, at the right time, it can be the most powerful weapon of all.